Have you ever heard of having to use scuba gear to explore an ancient pyramid? We didn't either, until we came across the story of archaeologist Piers Paul Craceman. His story involves the study of an ancient race just as advanced as the Egyptians, who shared the same continent with a history and culture just as rich and shrouded in mystery. Get ready as the Richest goes underwater to explore the tomb of a pharaoh that once ruled the Kingdom of Kush. Before we dive right into our pyramid diving story, let's back it up a bit and learn a little bit about pyramids first. Enormous architectural wonders built all over the world centuries before modern technology. Pyramids were used by ancient peoples as both places of worship and as monuments and tombs of the dead. It's estimated that there are somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 pyramids still standing in the world today. They can be found on every continent on Earth except for icy Antarctica. The most famous, of course, are the Great Pyramids of Giza in Cairo, Egypt. The largest stands at 455 feet. The ancient Egyptians built these amazing structures as tombs and monuments for their pharaohs. Over in the Americas, many ancient tribes built step pyramids as temples for worshiping their gods. The famous El Castillo Pyramid of Chichen Itza, for example, was built by the Mayans over 1,100 years ago in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. It was built as a temple to the serpent god Kukulkan. In ancient Greece, the Pyramid of Hellinikon was built some 100 years earlier than the Great Pyramids of Egypt. Its purpose remains unknown. In China, there stands the Great White Pyramid of Xi'an. We know very little about it as the Chinese government has banned access to the structure. But rumor has it that it could be twice the height of the Great Pyramid at Giza. On the Australian continent, there are two possible yet unconfirmed pyramid sites, the Gympie Pyramid and Walsh's Pyramid. And as previously mentioned, exactly zero on Antarctica, despite a recent debunked story about one. The images turned out to be snow-covered, pyramidal-shaped mountaintops. The country that holds the title for the most pyramids still intact is surprisingly not Egypt, but its neighbor to the south on the African continent, Sudan. Sudan is home to some 240 pyramids, built by the ancient Kushite people. Sudan and the Kushites also happen to be at the center of our archaeological story. The Kingdom of Kush, also referred to as Nubia, was located in northeast Africa just south of ancient Egypt in modern-day Sudan, and it had close ties to ancient Egypt. Its main cities were situated along the Nile River and two of its main tributaries, the White Nile and the Blue Nile. If not for the formation of these waterways and their proximity to gold and iron ore deposits, it's likely humans would not have settled in this dry desert region. The Kingdom of Kush lasted for over 1,400 years. First established circa 1070 BCE, when it gained its independence from Egypt. In 727 BCE, Kush took control of ancient Egypt, ruling it until the Assyrians arrived in the next century. Once the Roman Empire conquered Egypt, the Kingdom of Kush began to weaken, and eventually collapsed sometime in the 4th century CE. The Kushite were very similar to the ancient Egyptians in many ways, sharing a religion, a form of government, and many aspects of culture. They worshipped Egyptian gods and mummified their dead and entombed them in pyramids. Aside from the pharaoh and other rulers, the highest class in Kush were the religious leaders, the priests. Much like their Egyptian neighbors, religion and a strong belief in the afterlife played an important role in the life of the Kushite people. The pyramids that the Kushite people built to entomb their pharaohs and other important figures looked very similar to the ancient Egyptian structures. They did have a few key differences, though. For one, they differed in size, with the average Kushite pyramid standing roughly 6 to 30 meters or 20 to 98 feet high, while the average Egyptian pyramid was much taller, at roughly 138 meters or 453 feet. There was also one other major difference. While the Egyptians' burial chambers were located inside the pyramidal structure itself, the Kush burial chambers were located underneath the pyramids, buried below the structure. One such leader buried in this manner was the pharaoh Nestasen. He ruled the Kingdom of Kush from 335 to 310 BCE. The little that we do know about this Nubian king is from writings on stone tablets and a mere few artifacts. The writings tell us that the highlight of his reign came when the pharaoh Nestasin defeated an invasion from Upper Egypt and gained many spoils in his victory. Once Nestasin crossed into the afterlife, he became the last Kushite king to be buried in the royal cemetery and necropolis at Napata, a glorious graveyard spanning more than 7.5 million square feet. The site of the royal cemetery, the ancient city of Napata, is now Karima, Sudan, located about 1 mile west of the Nile riverbank. Seen from the sky, one of its most commanding features is an arc of some 20 pyramids, built between 650 BCE and 300 BCE. National Geographic's Kristen Romey describes this arc of pyramids as appearing, quote, strung together like gems on a delicate necklace. There are more than 20 pyramids at the site overall, though. At least 60 Nubian kings and queens are buried there, among hundreds of other individuals. The most famous resident is Pharaoh Taharqa, who ruled all of Egypt during the 7th century BCE and whose efforts to aid nearby Jerusalem are even mentioned in the Old Testament. The pharaoh Nestasin's 2,300-year-old pyramid tomb, the last of its kind, stands at roughly 30 feet or 9.1 meters and was erected at one of the lowest points of elevation at the royal necropolis. This is one of the reasons why Nestasin's burial chambers is completely underwater. Why exactly? The pyramid's proximity to the Nile River, combined with both natural and man-made climate change, has caused the groundwater levels to rise over the centuries, submerging the tombs that are cut into the bedrock underneath the pyramids. Due to its low elevation, Nestasin's tomb is among the most submerged. Enter archaeologist Piers Paul Kreisman. Kreisman holds the dual title of both Egyptologist and underwater archaeologist. Yes, indeed, that is a thing. When Kreisman first visited the Royal Cemetery back in 2018, he saw his unique skill set as an opportunity to explore the watery tombs and discover more than what was ever uncovered when the site was first explored nearly a century ago. Back then, the water was only knee-deep. Now the water reached the ceiling of the tomb chambers. After Kreisman and his team spent the better part of a year digging the staircases leading to Nestasin's tomb out from under sand, they put on their scuba gear and headed into the murky waters. Kreisman had to make his way through a series of 3 chambers while navigating in water thick with muddy sediment and making vision close to impossible. When they reached the 3rd and final chamber, they discovered a treasure trove of artifacts. Among them, and covered in bits of gold foil, were shabti dolls, funerary figures whom the ancient Nubians believed would accompany the deceased into the afterlife. Also in the chamber, the sarcophagus of the pharaoh Nestasin himself. The only problem? That ceiling-high muddy water makes excavation and study of these artifacts highly problematic. Kreisman is optimistic, though, and now, packed with experiences and knowing what to expect, their aim is to return to the site later in 2020 and attempt to excavate the burial chamber in what they themselves argue is an audacious and logistical challenge. Only then will we know the extent and value of the treasures inside this pyramid, and perhaps, eventually, the dozens of others. Says Kreisman, quote, "I think we finally have the technology to be able to tell the story of Nuri, to fill in the blanks of what happened here. It's a remarkable point in history that so few know about. It's a story that deserves to be told." End quote. So how about you? Would you take the plunge into those muddy waters to uncover ancient treasures? Give this video a quick thumbs up if you would. How much do you think the treasure inside Nestasin's tomb is worth? Let us know in the comments. If you liked this material, you should definitely check out our related video on how many pyramids there are around the world. There's also our video titled Ancient Discoveries Scientists Still Can't Explain. The links to both are in the description of this video. Don't forget to subscribe to The Richest and be sure and join our notification squad. We are creating new and exciting content all the time, and you don't want to miss a thing. Finally, thanks for tuning in to The Richest, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.